Alex, I was driving past that new development on the south side yesterday, the one where they've got about 40 houses going up at once. And I had to pull over, just sat there for a minute watching the framing crews. There is something almost musical about a crew that's in the rhythm, slamming two by fours together until a skeleton just rises out of the dirt.
Only you could find musicality in a bunch of guys with pneumatic nail guns at 7 in the morning. To me, it just looks like a giant, dangerous game of Jenga.
It's the ultimate 3D puzzle, really. But it's the foundation of everything we do. Whether you're building a birdhouse or a barn, if you don't understand how those sticks of lumber carry a load down to the earth, you're just guessing. And guessing in carpentry is a great way to end up with a door that won't close or a roof that decides to become a floor.
Well, that's why we're here today. We're doing a deep dive into framing basics because let's be honest, for a lot of people listening, and maybe for me too, a wall is just a wall until you have to cut into it or build one from scratch. Then suddenly, words like king stud and header start sounding like a medieval court.
It does sound a bit royal, doesn't it? But every one of those names serves a purpose. I remember the first shed I built by myself. I was maybe 19. I didn't understand the concept of a header over the door. I just figured, hey, it's a small building, the siding will hold it up.
Oh no. Let me guess. The structural siding didn't live up to its name?
First heavy snowfall we got, the top of that door frame bowed so hard the door wedged shut. I had to climb out the window like a burglar just to go get a shovel. It was a humbling lesson in how gravity never takes a day off. It's always pushing down, and framing is just our way of politely asking it to go around the openings we want to walk through.
All right, let's start from the bottom then, literally. Before we even get to the walls, there's the floor. I see people talking about joists and subfloors. How does that dance start?
It's all about the sill plate first. That's the piece of pressure-treated lumber that actually shakes hands with the concrete foundation. You've got to use treated wood there because concrete holds moisture like a sponge, and regular pine will rot faster than a pumpkin in November if it sits directly on it.
Okay, so sill plate down, then come the joists?
Exactly. The floor joists are the ribs. They span across the foundation to support the subfloor. And here's the detail that trips up a lot of beginners. Crowning.
Crowning? Is that the royal terminology coming back?
Sort of. See, no piece of lumber is perfectly straight. If you sight down a 2x10, it's usually got a slight curve to it. You always want that curve, the crown, pointing up toward the sky. That way, when the weight of the furniture and the people starts pushing down, it flattens the board out. If you put the crown down, your floor is going to feel like a trampoline from day one.
That makes sense. It's pre-stressing it. But what about the gaps? I see one joist every, 16 inches?
16 inches on center is the golden rule of the industry. It's the magic number because it divides perfectly into 4-foot and 8-foot sheets of plywood or OSB. If you mess that layout up by even half an inch, you're going to be reaching the end of your subfloor sheet and realize there's nothing underneath it to nail into. And there is no lonelier feeling in the world than standing on a piece of plywood that isn't supported by a joist.
I can imagine. So you get your floor joists capped with a rim joist to box it all in, you slap down your subfloor, and now you've got a platform. Now we get to the part everyone recognizes, the walls.
The anatomy of a wall is where the real logic of framing shines. You start with your plates. You've got the sole plate on the bottom and the top plate on the, top.
I've seen some walls with 2 boards at the top. Is that just because someone had extra lumber?
No, that double top plate is vital. It's there to tie the different wall sections together. You overlap the joints at the corners with that second layer. It turns individual wall segments into a single, rigid box. Without it, your house would have the structural integrity of a cardboard fort.
Okay, so we have the top and bottom. Then we have the studs. These are the vertical soldiers holding everything up, right?
Right, common studs, usually 16 inches apart again. But life gets interesting when you want to put a window or a door in that wall. That's when the common studs get replaced by a whole family of specialized members.
Here we go. The king, the jack, and the cripple. Sounds like a very depressing folktale.
It really does, but look at it this way. The king stud is the full height one that runs from plate to plate on either side of the opening. It's the anchor. Nailed right to the inside of that is the jack stud, or sometimes called a trimmer. The jack is shorter. It stops early to provide a shoulder for the header to sit on.
Oh, so the header isn't just floating there. It's actually sitting on the shoulders of the jack studs.
Precisely. The header is usually a much beefier piece of wood, like 2 2x10s sandwiched together. Its entire job is to take the weight coming from above the window and divert it sideways, down through the jack studs, and into the floor. It's a bridge.
And the cripple studs?
Those are the shorties. They fill the gaps between the header and the top plate, or between the windowsill, the rough sill, and the bottom plate. They don't carry the main load, but they give you a place to nail your drywall and siding so it doesn't flop around.
So I have to ask, why is everyone so obsessed with plumb, level, and square? My uncle used to say, that's what shims and wood filler are for.
Your uncle is the reason I have gray hair, Alex. Look, if your wall is 1/8 of an inch out of plumb, meaning it's leaning slightly, that doesn't seem like much. But by the time you get to the roof, that leaning wall has thrown off the rafter angles. Then the roofers are swearing at you. Then the drywallers come in and realize the corners aren't 90 degrees, so they have to go heavy on the mud. Then the finished carpenter tries to install baseboards and they look like a zigzag.
So a small mistake at the framing stage.
It's a tax you pay on every single step that follows. I once framed a small bathroom where I didn't check the corner for square. I just eyeballed it. When I went to install the bathtub, a rigid fiberglass unit, it wouldn't fit. The room was a trapezoid. I had to rip out 3 days of work just because I was too lazy to pull a diagonal measurement.
A trapezoid bathroom. It sounds avant-garde.
It was a disaster. Since then, I'm a fanatic about the 3-4-5 rule. You know that one?
Refresh me. It's been a while since geometry class.
If you measure 3 feet along one wall and 4 feet along the other, the distance between those 2 points should be exactly 5 feet. If it's 5 feet and half an inch, your wall is drunk. Fix it before you reach for the nail gun.
Let's talk about the lid, the roof. This seems like the part where people get the most intimidated. Rafters, pitches, bird's mouth cuts. It feels like high-level calculus.
It can feel that way, but it's really just about triangles. The most common is the gable roof, that classic A shape. You've got a ridge board at the very peak, which is horizontal, and the rafters lean against it from both sides.
What keeps the rafters from just sliding outward and flattening the house like a pancake?
Excellent question. That's the job of the ceiling joists. They act as ties. They nail into the bottom of the rafters and the top of the walls, essentially pulling the feet of the rafters together so they can't spread. If you want one of those fancy vaulted ceilings without those cross beams, you have to use a ridge beam, which is a huge, heavy engineered timber that carries the weight like a spine. But for most of us, it's those ceiling joists doing the heavy lifting.
And what's a bird's mouth? I hear framers whispering about that like it's a dark art.
It's just a little notch cut into the rafter so it sits flat on the top of the wall. It looks like a bird's open beak, hence the name. If you don't cut it, the rafter is just touching the corner of the wall at a single point. Very unstable. You want that rafter to have a nice, comfortable seat to rest on while it holds up the world.
What about the different types of rafters? I saw a diagram that had hip rafters and jack rafters.
A hip roof is when the roof slopes down on all 4 sides, like a pyramid with the top cut off. The hip rafter is the one that runs diagonally at the corners. The jack rafters are the ones that get shorter and shorter as they move toward the corner. It's a bit more complex to cut because you're dealing with compound angles that are tilted in 2 directions at once. To be honest, Alex, the first time I tried to cut a hip rafter, I wasted about 4 sticks of lumber before I got one that didn't have a gap big enough to stick a sandwich through.
A sandwich? That's a very specific unit of measurement.
It was a turkey club, extra mayo. But that's the thing about framing. It's forgiving in some ways because it's going to be covered up, but it's unforgiving in others. The strength comes from the tight fit of those joints.
If someone is listening to this and they're thinking about tackling their first framing project, maybe a partition wall in their basement or a new garden shed, what's the one thing they usually overlook?
Choosing the right lumber. People go to the big box store and just grab the first 2x4s on the stack. You've got to be the lumber.
Be the lumber? Tiger, are we going Zen now?
I mean, you have to look at it. Pick it up. Sight down the edge. If it looks like a hockey stick or a piece of dry pasta, put it back. You want straight, stable wood. And for the love of all things holy, check the moisture content. If the wood is green, meaning it's still wet from the mill, it's going to shrink as it dries. You'll frame a perfect wall today, and 6 months from now, you'll hear pop, pop, pop as the studs twist and pull your drywall screws out.
So look for kiln dried?
Exactly. KD or S dry. It's worth the extra few cents. And remember, a 2x4 isn't actually 2 inches by 4 inches.
Right. It's 1.5 by 3.5. Why is the industry trying to lie to us, Tiger?
It's the nominal size versus the actual size. It starts out as a 2x4, but then they plane it down to make it smooth and pretty, and suddenly you've lost half an inch on both sides. If you try to plan a layout using exactly 4 inches for every stud, your math is going to be a train wreck by the time you reach the end of the wall.
I can see you've been on that train before.
I've been the conductor of that train, Alex. I've arrived at the end of a long wall only to realize I was 3 inches short because I forgot to account for the actual thickness of the corner studs. It's a long walk back to the saw when you realize your own brain betrayed you.
We've covered floor joists, crown, 16 on center, king and jack studs, headers, and rafters. It's a lot, but I think the biggest takeaway for me is that framing is really just a system of transferring weight.
That's it. It's a relay race. The roof rafters pass the weight to the headers pass it to the jack studs, the studs pass it to the floor plates, and the plates pass it to the foundation. As long as there's a solid path of wood all the way down to the ground, that building is going to stand for 100 years.
It's funny. We spend all this time making sure the framing is perfect, and then we hide it behind drywall and paint. It's like the invisible art of the maker world.
It is. But you can feel good framing. You feel it when you walk across the floor and it doesn't bounce. You feel it when you close a door and it clicks shut perfectly every single time without catching. There's a quiet satisfaction in knowing that the skeleton of your project is honest.
Honest framing. I like that.
My old mentor used to tell me, build it like you're going to live behind the drywall. He meant that even if nobody sees that header or that corner brace, you know it's there and you know it was done right.
Well, I think I'm ready to go frame. Maybe a very small birdhouse. Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Start small. Just remember your 3, 4, 5, keep your crown up, and don't be afraid to pull a nail if it isn't right. The wood doesn't mind, and your future self will thank you.
Great advice. Thanks for walking us through the bones of the build today, Tiger.
Anytime. Now, go find a tape measure and start checking things for square. You might be surprised what you find.
Oh, I already know my coffee table is a trapezoid. Don't tell me.
We'll fix that next week.